personally, I'm hugely excited. Is what we've been waiting for. The IFRS Foundation had announced that they would be establishing the ISSB earlier this year, and they've been working behind the scenes, changing the constitution of the IFRS Foundation in preparation for the announcement that was made yesterday. I can't emphasize how much this is important. Net zero is a journey that everyone is about to go on. After COP, we have to start seeing the change, driving the change for sustainability and for net zero. And we need the tools. We manage what we measure. So the idea of having a consistent, global, and probably mandatory suite of reporting standards is exactly what business needs in order to be able to demonstrate and prove the change that is hugely necessary. And the IFRS is probably one of the best bodies to do that. The International Accounting Standards Board, which is the other organization alongside ISSB, publishes the International Financial Reporting Standards. IFRS is adopted in 166 countries around the world. And so I think the ambition is to see the same adoption rate of the new sustainability disclosure standards across as many of those countries as possible. And I think, given that the G20 last weekend endorsed the work of the IFRS Foundation, I think that we will see rapid adoption, particularly across OECD, EU, and G20 countries. So the International Sustainability Standards Board is still being set up, but right now they are selecting the chair and the vice chair. But because we're running out of time, 1 minute to midnight, according to Prime Minister Johnson, we needed things to get started. So what the IFRS trustees did was they set up a technical readiness working group. And this working group has published not even preliminary disclosure standards, but prototype standards. And there are two. One is relating to general disclosure and is quite consistent and follows what we see under the IFRS standards. And the second is then in relation to specifically climate disclosure. And in relation to climate disclosures, the tenets that are set out in the draft standards relate to governance, strategy, both risk and opportunity relating to climate change, risk management, and then the metrics and targets that businesses will set themselves on their net zero journey.
Well, it really is important. And Nick did a wonderful job of sort of setting the background for clients to consider why this is important. We do think there are 3 key points for clients to consider. The first is that this proposal now creates a set of granular expectations of reporting in areas of ESG concerns. Metrics for analysis that are proposed, indicating the types of information one might expect a company to be able to create, and requirements for disclosure of ongoing results of monitoring of progress towards stated ESG goals, including such things as differentiation between achieved carbon reduction by internal actions and supply chain emissions versus carbon offset usage to achieve ESG goals. And they include a potential requirement to report the percentage of management compensation dependent upon the achievement of these ESG goals. They also have very specific definitions of some of the scope component terms associated with ESG analysis, as well as a listed item of 13 scope 3 emissions analysis, meaning that there's an expectation you will report both scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 analysis inside of your annual financial reporting. And finally, there are specific ESG reporting metrics for inclusion in your financial reporting reports that cover industry sectors. There are multiple industry sectors for then a granular manner and set of metrics for very specific components, such as the consumer products and industries are broken down to such things as apparel, accessories, and footwear reporting with metrics, or e-commerce has a set of reporting, or extractive and metals processing industries might differentiate between oil and gas midstream versus oil and gas refining and marketing with different metrics. There are over 70 different specified industry breakouts with individual metrics for each, and many large firms may actually cover more than one specific industry sector. So these three things create areas of focus that companies can look at. As I noted just now, the industry breakouts are very specific, and again, go into multiple consumer, they have grocery and restaurants listed individually. And there is, in the guidance in the initial section of the document, is 15 sections. And the 14th section actually says, for scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions, the entity shall provide an explanation of the activities included within the disclosed metric. For example, an online retailer may be exposed to risks or opportunities related to the greenhouse gas emissions arising out of third-party transportation and distribution services purchased by the reporting entity for outbound logistics of products sold to customers. And that information may be determined as material. So that should be included in their determination of scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions. This has just done three things that in the past may not have been considered. One is they're pointing out to things like online retailers, as an area which people may not think of as as one of the critical ESG areas. The second is they have actually identified things like the shipping associated with selling your products. That may be a greenhouse gas emission attribution that companies haven't thought of, which may change the materiality, if you would, of their greenhouse gas emissions and make it a much larger footprint for them to report. And then they have actually talked about that these may be material to its users, which is a very specific accounting term that can raise legal issues for people for not having reported them. So this, I think, at least requires firms to review this across any industry and have a sense of whether or not they will have a significant data and controls process requirement associated with this. Yes, it does. And I think two places that we had identified is one, metrics and following those metrics associated with it. The second piece that we had identified, both for SEC exposures and for CFTC, which is our Commodities Futures Trading Commission exposure, was associated with putting risk controls around asset investment, assets, and offset transactions in a manner that many firms may not have operationalized at this point in time. This IFRS proposal specifically talks to asset valuations impacts associated with potential climate change impacts, and derivatives and control structures around your investment and use of either offsets or investments in emission reduction that may not currently be fully operationalized by companies. Those were places that we were identifying the need for clients to address some of these, and the focus of Norton Rose on helping people to analyze and operationalize those requirements.